Welcome to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast, where we deconstruct the methods, marketing, and mindset of successful business people and chiropractors from around the world. And now your host, Dr. Richard Day.
Yes, I am Dr. Richard Day, and this is the Chiro Business Mojo podcast. Dr. Gilles Lamarche is a passionate chiropractor who has practiced for more than 25 years in Northern Ontario, Canada. He's an avid student of the psychology and philosophy of success. He has spoken to audiences throughout Canada, the United States, Mexico, Japan, Scandinavia, Australia, Europe, and the Caribbean. He is the author and co-author of more than 13 books, including The Art of Being Healthy series, Say Yes to Chiropractic Success, and the Parker System for Professional Success. Gilles was named Canadian Chiropractor of the Year in 2006 by the readers of Canadian Chiropractor Magazine. And for the last 3 years, he served as the Vice President of Professional Relations at Life University. Welcome, Dr. Gilles Lamarche.
Thank you very much for having me, Richard. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning.
Well, feel free to jump in and correct or make up for any gaps in your bio that I may have glossed right over.
Well, I mean, if we spent just time talking about my bio, we'd spend the entire 30 minutes just talking about a bio. I just feel, honored every day waking up to know that I'm a chiropractor, that 37 years ago, I graduated, and I'm as passionate about our profession today as I was the day that I entered practice in 1979. And I know that for some people, not everybody's successful in practice. Some find that they're struggling. Some find that people are, still sort of this anti-chiropractic movement of sorts. But the reality is, if we think back to an 18th century philosopher named Schopenhauer, he said, every great truth goes through three phases. First, it's ridiculed. Then it's violently opposed. Lastly, to be recognized as self-evident. And I believe that we are totally self-evident, but that's not necessarily all in the eyes of the public. So we continue to work in a really diligent fashion to bring the message of chiropractic, to keep it pure, because if you look at what's happening in science today, they're catching up to what we've been saying forever. I mean, yesterday I had the pleasure of listening to Dr. Michael Longyear, who is a clinician at NeuroLife Institute at Life University, and he was speaking to the Student Philosophy Alliance. It's a Green Book study club. And he took a section out of the Science of Chiropractic, written in 1916, and he was talking about neuroplasticity. And he said, that's sort of that magic word that has emerged in the past decade or so with neuroscientists, neuroplasticity. But Didi talked about it. BJ talked about neuroplasticity. They just didn't use that word. Mm-hmm. So the reality is that the world is catching up to what we've understood as it relates to the power of an adjustment, its effect on the nervous system, and now we know it has a direct effect on brain physiology, brain morphology, brain function. If you read any of the research by Dr. Heidi Havik out of New Zealand and her crew, and if you listen to anything that Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about. So we are, in my opinion, we're at the best time in history to be chiropractors. We've got to remain steadfast. We've got to continue and improve how we communicate what chiropractic truly is, because we've diverted in the last many decades from what chiropractic really can do to enhance human function. And if we stay that way, you'll see that more people will actually get on that bandwagon. And that's what I'm experiencing when I speak in public. That's what I'm experiencing when I speak to individuals socially. They're starting to get it. They go, my gosh, I had no idea that's what chiropractors did. And so if we come to chiropractic and we deliver the truth consistently, people start getting the message and they start getting involved. Then they start getting results, and invariably they become advocates, ambassadors for chiropractic and for your practice. So we as a profession and every individual chiropractor must maintain a high level of diligence in communicating chiropractic and becoming great communicators from the spoken word, from the written word, and so on.
Well, I applaud you for staying passionate throughout your entire career, especially in the face of when the research wasn't there. And I agree with you. It is such an exciting time. I've had the pleasure of hearing Dr. Heidi Havoc speak and seeing her research, and it is so exciting to see that this science is finally backing up exactly what you said, what we've known and been doing for years. So take us back to the beginning for you. How did you become passionate about chiropractic? What is it that got you started in the profession?
So I was in ninth grade, and I was in an all-boys Catholic school. I was a little tiny guy. I skipped 2 grades in elementary school. So ninth grade, I was 12. And as a joke, a new teacher, since everybody else picked on me, he decided he would pick on me that day. And as a joke, he pulled the chair from underneath me, and I landed on my bottom, on the concrete floor in the classroom, and I injured my back. And of course, all the boys laughed, and the teacher laughed, and everything was really funny. But until they realized that I was actually hurt. And, the traditional route, 6 months of, going to the physician and saying, take this medication and it'll get better in time. You're young. You'll bounce back. 6 months later, I'm not any better. And someone suggested to my mother, well, maybe you should take him to a chiropractor. And my mother said, what's a chiropractor? Nobody in my family had ever been to a chiropractor. You're looking at 1967. Nobody had been to a chiropractor, but there was this new chiropractor that was suggested in our town, and I went to visit him, and he did a very thorough consultation. He did an examination, did x-rays. I came back the next day, did a report of findings in front of me and my mom, and he was really speaking to me. And I think one thing that I enjoyed was that he was seeing me as his patient, and my mother was just listening in. And then he talked about this weird thing that I'd never heard of before called a subluxation. But he talked about some subluxations that were probably recent, some subluxations that I'd probably had for a long time. And he explained how a subluxation affected nervous system function. This was all new to me, but he had an autonomic nervous system chart on the wall. He had a peripheral nervous system chart on the wall. And he started describing the areas of subluxation in my spine. And then he said to my mother, did he ever get dropped off like a change table or fall on his head or something? He's got some really serious issues in the lower part of his neck and the upper part of his back. And then all of a sudden he started relating digestion, elimination. And my mother looked at him and said, he's been having, she relayed I had not been dropped, but I was a forceps delivery baby and that I'd had issues. So I wouldn't tell you I was a sick child. I was always an unwell child. I always had tummy pain. I always had indigestion, didn't go to the bathroom on a regular basis. And so he said that, once these subluxations be corrected, not only was it likely that my back pain would be gone, but my physiological functions, would probably be restored. And he didn't guarantee anything, but he related it. And I'll tell you, I didn't believe a word he said. I thought if this guy helps me get rid of my back pain, just, I'm going to be a happy camper. And I know that's all he's going to be able to do because I've been to all these other doctors and they all tell me there's nothing wrong with me. Well, lo and behold, as you well know, whether you believe in chiropractic or not, when subluxations get corrected, your nervous system starts to function differently and it optimizes. And within a very few short weeks, months, probably a month or two at least, I started recognizing that not only was my low back pain gone, but I was going to the bathroom normally. I could eat whatever I was eating and I didn't have, pain in my throat or pain in my chest. I had no indigestion. And his name is Dr. Ronald Ingard. And I remember telling him when I went in to get checked, I said, when I'm big, I'm going to be like you. And I was so convinced that this was the only way that people should be taken care of except in a crisis. And so off I went. I finished high school. I ran track through high school. I ran cross country through high school. I had good grades, did my undergrad, went to chiropractic school, graduated. And one thing that I remember him telling me when I said to him, when I'm big, I'm going to be like you, he said, well, promise me that if you decide to become a chiropractor, before you graduate, you go to a Parker seminar. And, I didn't know anything about that. And I said, well, what's that? He said, that's where they're going to teach you to be successful. And so I just put that in the back of my head because I remember telling him, well, aren't they going to teach me that at school? And he says, no, it's not the school's job to teach you to be successful. It's your job to learn to be successful. The school job is to teach you everything you need to learn so you can pass your board exams and get a license. I was like, okay. And so lo and behold, I was in my junior year in chiropractic school in Toronto, and I saw an ad, and off I went to New York with 5 or 6 buddies, all piled into a car, all piled into one hotel room. And I got to personally meet Dr. Jim Parker and was fortunate to have him become my mentor, which he was from 1977 until the day he died in 1997. So I had a very, very fortunate collision with this great man, because he invited everybody to his suite. There's probably 3,000 people here in New York, and none of my friends wanted to go, but he would do that on a regular basis. None of my friends wanted to go. They said, I will never get in. There'd be too many people. And I decided to go, and I got up there, and there was maybe 30 people in this beautiful suite. And I went up thinking I could just peek my head in, because they had said that's where President Reagan had stayed the weekend before. And I was like, wow, I wonder what this looks like. I'm from this little town in northern Canada. I'd never really seen the big lights. So I went up there, and, some of the people that are up there are names that, you and the listeners probably remember, like Dr. Charles Ward, who's still a great chiropractic advocate coach. Dr. Larry Markson was there. Dr. Kirby Landis, Richard Yenny was there. There's a bunch of people. But Jim loved students, and that was before he had started Parker College, Parker University, and he ran the seminar series. And so I just developed this relationship with him, and I went 3 times before I graduated, and I basically hit the ground running. I can't tell you, I don't have a sad story about failing in practice and then discovering an aha moment and then making it. I basically was in the black my first week in practice and never looked back. And I would tell you that it's because I did exactly what he told me to do. I didn't try to reinvent the wheel. I did a thorough consultation. I always did a thorough examination. I always, did x-rays. I'd wait the next day to review all the information and present the report of findings. And I did it the way he taught me, because, this guy had built 18 successful clinics in Texas. Why would I try to do it any different way? And so I've always been a consistent student. And I can't remember where I read that or who I heard it from, but someone somewhere mentioned that the difference between a master and a student is that a student thinks that he or she can become a master, where a master recognizes that he or she is always a student and can become more masterful. And so I developed morning rituals to prepare myself physically, mentally, spiritually, that I continue to practice today. And I started way back then. I read principles. I understand the 33 chiropractic principles. I read 5 or 10 minutes out of a green book every day to keep myself focused, to keep myself passionate. And then, of course, then I just recognized the beauty of a chiropractic adjustment as patients get well. And another line that he had taught me that was so powerful, had such a huge impact on my life, was take no credit, take no blame. In other words, when the patient gets well, recognize that it's the body that's doing the healing. And so don't let your ego get in front of you and say, oh yeah, I am so great, but rather continue to be masterful at the art of detecting, analyzing, and correcting a subluxation. And just watch what happens. And so the stories, the testimonials, they came, by the thousands. And it wasn't because I was any better than anybody else. It was because I focused on the basics. Human interaction, loving service, being kind, being respectful, teaching the principle, giving people an opportunity to participate in a process of change and growth, and recognizing their innate intelligence and not having a fear to teach them the chiropractic principles.
Wow, there's so many important messages in what you are laying out there, and what a great experience to be able to learn from one of the masters so early in your education and in your profession. Many chiropractors that I come in contact with, when they were in school, they were mostly, and rightly, really worried about making sure they passed their classes and their boards. But you're absolutely right. If you can also, in the back of your mind or somewhere along the way, be picking up the psychology aspects of success, you'll be able to hit the ground running and won't have that failure story to go along with your practice. So it's so important, and so many lessons that you are laying out there.
Yeah, and it's really all about focus. I remember writing a little segment in a book that you mentioned earlier, Say Yes to Chiropractic Success, and the segment in my opening was about a magnifying glass, and I wrote something like, sunlight focused through a magnifying glass can start a fire, but the conditions have to be just right. Because if the magnifying glass is too far from the surface, the rays get diffused, they don't generate enough heat. It's like water, it boils at 100 degrees centigrade. But if the temperature only reaches 99, the water doesn't boil. Like an airplane has to hit a certain speed before the air under the wing allows it to rise. And so I find that students, doctors, spend so much amounts of energy trying to become successful. They seem to do everything or try everything or always looking for something new, but sometimes they're just going through the motions and they wonder why success eludes them. Yet you look at other people who go through the same motions and are literally, successful, which what appears to be overnight. But the difference between the two is that those of us who experience the success that appears to be overnight in the eyes of others, we put our feet to the fire. We have rituals. We do things repeatedly because it enhances how we think. It enhances our physical body, it enhances our mind, it enhances our spirit. And we come to it from this space of desire. So you've got to want it. And when you really, really want it, you then have to believe. Jim used to say you've got to have FCB in your PSI, faith, confidence, and belief in your product, service, and idea, and in yourself. So this idea of accepting you, loving you unconditionally, so you can then share that with humanity is a powerful place. Because all you need to have is one or two of those elements out of alignment. Your energy, your focus, your everything gets so diffused that you don't achieve what you think you could achieve. So every part of you, your heart, your mind, your soul, your physical body, every part of you has to buy in to this process of possibility. Because if you look, there's not a condition known to man that hasn't responded to chiropractic, as far as I know. Not a condition. Now we're not condition based. So I didn't teach my patients that it was a condition, but it was a condition that usually brought them into the office. And the reality is that very close to 100% of new patients that came into my office came because they had a condition. They had something that they saw as being wrong. And my job was to show them how right they were, how much ability they had to heal once the interference was removed. And so when we focus on that and we teach from that paradigm, their lives are different. And so when someone would come into my office, I had a ritual. So there was our team had a ritual as how the patient was welcomed. They completed the forms. They'd be given a tour of the office, for example, to make them feel totally comfortable. They'd be brought into the consultation room. They would be asked to sit in a particular chair, which was angled in a particular way, so they could see me when I walked in. They could see a spine hanging there. They could see the autonomic nervous system chart. They could see the peripheral nervous system chart. There was a view box on the wall if I needed to. I always had somebody's x-ray up there. But all of that to create an ambiance of trust. And I would review the questionnaire that they completed before walking into the room. I'd make a couple little notes. And then in a very ritualistic fashion, because it became part of my process, I would walk in. So if I'd walk in to see you, for example, I'd walk in, I'd say, "Good morning, Richard. I'm Dr. LaMarche. I'm honored that you've chosen me to be your family chiropractor." So some people may say, well, why those words exactly? Just think about them. What feeling that would give someone, and what we would preemptively be creating is already this thought that I am your family chiropractor. And not egotistically, but I'm honored that you chose me to be your family chiropractor. And then if someone had referred them, which was typical, I would thank the referral source, in front of the patient, say, I'm going to send Jane a card. She's had great results at our office. And, I'm so grateful that she referred you here. And then I would thank them. I'd say, thank you so much for doing a great job filling out the form. There are some concerns we're going to want to discuss. But before we move on, please allow me to explain how we work in our office. So before I got into the OPQ-RST and asking about their condition, I'm going to start right there, changing the thought process in their mind, because my goal is for them to be a practice member for life. And if not in my office, in somebody else's office, but to be a practice member in a chiropractic office and to bring their entire family. And I do it without having to sell it. I teach it. And so because they were sat in front of the spine, the autonomic nervous system, the peripheral nervous system chart, if you can sort of just see that in your mind, I was that entire wall. I always started with the same question. I said, "So Richard, can I ask you a question?" And do you want to play the role? I'm going to pretend you're sitting there. Okay. So Richard, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So if you think back to high school biology class, and now a caveat, Richard, you have to pretend you're not a chiropractor. But okay. We'll see where the answer gives. So if you think back to high school biology class, what do you remember your teacher telling you was the most important system in the human body?
I think the brain, maybe.
Okay, so that is not the typical answer that we would get, but I'll go down that. I'll tell you the typical answer, then I'll go down the road with you, because the odd times somebody did say the brain. But the number one answer that I would get most of the time is the heart.
Yeah, it's hard as a chiropractor to go back to. Exactly. That's what I was saying. You have to pretend you're not a chiropractor. So the number one answer I would typically get would be the heart. Okay.
And I'd say, you're right. That's probably what your teacher taught you. You see, you've got to ask a question so you never make the person wrong. If I said, well, what do you think is the most important system? And you said the heart, I'd say, well, no, you're wrong. It's not that. What kind of relationship am I building with you? How does it feel to that person sitting in front of you if you make them wrong in the first 60 to 90 seconds you met them? Mm-hmm. You're not building a relationship. So I would say, you're right. That's probably what your teacher taught you. But science has discovered and has proven that there's a system that governs all systems, including your heart. For example, I'm going to assume that you went to sleep last night. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Of course, you'd say yes. I'd say, and you woke up this morning and your heart was still beating. What told it to do that? Typical answer is that I don't know. I'd say, well, you look like you're in really, really good shape. You must exercise. And the patient says, yes, I do. I said, did you ever notice when you exercise that your heart starts to beat faster? You start to sweat. You start to breathe a lot quicker. You breathe a lot deeper. Did you ever notice that? Well, yeah, of course, doctor, I've noticed that. I said, well, what tells your body to do that? And they come back to, I don't know. And then I point to the skull. I said, what's in this? And they go, the brain. And my next question is, and what does the brain control? Richard, I've asked this thousands of times. The number one answer is everything. Everybody knows that the brain controls everything, but they never put the pieces of the puzzle together to figure out that if there's an interference somewhere between their brain and their tissue, that interference is going to lead to a dysfunction. They never put it together. And so after I say, you're right, the brain does control everything, I'd say, so let's look at this chart. And I'm not going to talk about their pain, But the examples I'm going to give as I explain the chart are all related to the symptoms that they've already identified on their intake form. So for example, if they said, I got low back pain, it radiates into my right leg, into my right testicle, or whatever it might be, I would relate my explanations that way. I'd say, okay, so let's look at this chart. And I would start with the peripheral nervous system chart, typically. And I'd say, okay, so you've got your brain here. I said, do you know how the brain communicates information to the rest of your body? And sometimes they say, yeah, I think the spinal cord. Sometimes they say no, but I would point it. I said, it's through the brainstem here and the spinal cord. And I said, and if you follow this, you'll see that from the spinal cord, there are nerve branches that exit, that go to all parts of your body, including your low back and your right leg, if that was what they were complaining about. And then I'd move over to the autonomic nervous system chart. And I'd say, if you look at these nerves, you'll see that these nerves also go to the right testicle, but also go to the bowel and the bladder, et cetera, et cetera. And then would be my next question. I said, do you think that if the message from your brain to these parts of your body if the message is not getting to these parts of your body, do you think that could be the cause of why you're showing up in our office today? And it's like deer in the headlights, right? They go, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And so then you get into the OPQRST, you do the stuff that you need to do legally. And at the end, my last question of the consult is always, so tell me, Richard, we understand this is what's going on, but what is it that you can't do that you'd love to be able to do because of what's happening here? And you may say, well, you know what? I can't play. I got 4 kids and I just can't get on the floor and play with my kids anymore. It's just breaking my heart because they're after me. They want to play with me. And you see there, I've got an emotional tie. I've got an emotional tie to you with your children. And I'd say, wow, I understand. I've got 3 kids and I know how much fun it is to play with my 3 kids. And now I've got 4 grandchildren, how much fun it is to play with them. I understand.
I want to, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't.
No, I'm good. Because then I go into an examination. Then I go into an examination process. But it's the setup piece. Because if you don't set it up, you're not building the relationship based on what you want to achieve in the long run. Because I've seen too many people come in and out of chiropractic offices. Back pain's there. They get adjusted. Back pain's gone. They're gone. And then they could come back 5 years later. They got serious degeneration that they didn't have 5 years before. It's crazy. We've got to teach it from the perspective of what it is that we truly offer.
Yeah, so much is going on in what you just went through there. And I think as chiropractors, we're probably focusing on the neurophysiology that you're talking about. But, you know, the psychological aspect, as you well know, is that humans put up barriers. They don't want to be told what to do. They are much better if they reach these conclusions on their own. And
Absolutely.
Through that series of questioning, that's what you're doing. You're really turning on that process. And then I loved when you talked about tying it back to an emotional, something personal for that person. It's so true. We're all at heart, I believe, and I see it over and over, selfish creatures. And if you can key in and say, how can I help you? What is something important that you wish you could do that you can't currently do? You're really speaking directly to that person's needs. And the entire course of the conversation you just laid out is so important because you're building that rapport. You're building that trust. And I have heard people memorize scripts and give a report of findings, and it is so sterile, and there is absolutely nothing, that rapport is not happening in a real way.
And it's not fun for the doctor either.
Oh, right.
Because they find it's just too mechanical. And, once you understand what's important to them, well, you make sure that you note it, or make sure that you remember it, because when you deliver your report of findings, you say, I've got great news for you, Richard. This is what's happening, blah, blah, blah. Imagine what your life is going to be like when you're subluxation free. Imagine what it's going to be like when you can get on the floor and play with your kids and you could be a rubble rouser with them. And imagine what you're like. And they go, really? Wow. Now they've got an emotion attached to their decision, and people make decisions on emotion. Mm-hmm. So this is not to sell them chiropractic. This is to make them aware of an opportunity that you've discovered what can help them get well and stay well.
And chiropractors.
That's our job.
And getting that patient buy-in, so to speak, and I'm doing air quotes, is so important. I've seen in patient compliance, more patients get well because they're more compliant with what your care plan is, because they do have that emotional involvement.
Exactly. So that's a big part of our job. So becoming great communicators. So for example, October 14th, 15th in Atlanta, we're hosting a Life Vision seminar. We host those 3 times a year at present. And the Talk the Tick competition, chiropractic students developing their elevator speech, if you like, or their short 5-minute healthcare class of sorts, from all over the country, and some from Spain and some from New Zealand. I mean, there's students coming from everywhere for this competition. We're going to host the preliminaries on the Thursday and then the finals on the English side. There's finals on the Friday. Well, we've got a Spanish and an English competition. And the process was initially started by Dr. Eric Van Slooten, but now taken over by Dr. Jason Deitch, who runs Amplified, and Dr. Brad Glowacki, who to me is a communication expert. But, Brad and Jason are going to be here as well, and other chiropractors who are spearheading this movement in different chiropractic institutions are going to be here as judges. For example, I don't have all the list of judges in front of me, but, Alex Vidon's very involved with one school, so he's going to be here as one of the judges. And it's just going to be an awesome group of people. And I support that, because if we could teach our students to become great communicators, this profession is going to thrive, absolutely thrive. Communicate with the spoken word, and learn to communicate also with the written word. 2 important pieces of building a practice, but more importantly, impacting your community. Communities are wanting to discover what you have, the gift of healing that exists in your hands. When you detect, analyze, and correct subluxations, people want to know. But if you don't communicate it, they'll never know. And as a profession, we've done a really lousy job of doing that. So it's imperative that we start individually, and that in time we build this collective consciousness of communication that really brings the truth. And so supporting research, whichever way you can. This morning I actually had to, realize that I had to pay my dues for the Australian Spinal Research Foundation. Because I got an email from them saying, "Oh, we're hoping you still want to be a member, but your card was declined." And I was like, "Yeah, my card was declined because you've been using the same card for a few years, and it had an expiry date of 09/14. That's why it was declined." So all I did was, I got on. I was like, "Oh, do you have this card?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, change the expiry date. It's now 09/19. And somebody said to me, "But it's in Australia." I said, "Yeah, it's in Australia. Look at some of the research they funded. Look at Heidi Havek's research that they funded. Phenomenal. They funded all sorts of other research. We've got to give to somebody, and they're an organization that is focused on subluxation neurological chiropractic research. It's not another damn study on back pain."
Well, I want to shift. We talked earlier about something you are working on, and that is a series of books called The Art of Being Healthy. Tell us about that.
Oh, that has been so much fun. So the last volume I did, this last year, we finished volume number 3, and the subtitle of this volume is Real Life Accounts of Children and Mothers Healing with Chiropractic. So the title, The Art of Being Healthy, Real Life Accounts of Children and Mothers Healing with Chiropractic. And now I'm starting another volume, and the subtitle of that is just going to be Real Life Accounts of People of all ages healing with chiropractic. And what I do, chiropractors submit stories to me, and I pick, the top 100 stories, let's say, to do, because typically a book will have about 100 stories, and then get the doctors to personally get involved. They pre-purchase copies of the book. I teach them how to use the book to broaden their circle of influence within their community. And every book, every author then gets a seal, if you like, a sticker, but it's a pretty seal that goes on the front of the book to actually customize the book. So, for example, Dr. Richard Day, your office address, your phone number, your website, etc. And I always suggest that they just gift it. So I always suggest that the sticker would be compliments of Dr. Richard Day, with your info. And I'll tell you, on August the 12th, and I've been committed to doing this, but on August the 12th this year, I had my first grandson was born. I have 3 granddaughters, but my first grandson was born, and he was immediately shipped into NICU. My daughter's daughter, my granddaughter, was born at home in the tub, and my daughter and son-in-law were planning the same thing for the second pregnancy. And the midwife decided there was some distress, so off to the hospital they went. But Huntley had an extremely, extremely traumatic birth and was given the diagnosis of HIE, which is hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. In other words, brain damage. They said he was having seizures. They wanted to put him on phenobarbital. I mean, you name it. Now, totally grateful that they kept him alive until I got there. But I got there within, 24 hours. They live in Edmonton, Canada, so it's pretty far away. But I got the first flight I could get out of here, headed over there, and won't share the entire story, but I'd already had a chiropractor get to his bedside within the first 90 minutes or so after he was born. And I chatted with her on the phone, and she described what she was feeling. I got there. I started working on his upper cervical occiput C1, C2 area about every 2 hours, 24 hours a day. And it was on the 4th day when his vitals started to stabilize, because the first 3 days they'd also dropped his body temperature by 3 degrees centigrade. So, he was at 34 degrees centigrade under a cooling system, but I would shove my hands in there. I would palpate his skull, palpate his upper cervical spine, do a light adjustment, go back, keep checking him. Nothing changed, Richard, for 3 days. On the 4th morning, when my daughter and son-in-law got up, because I was staying up all night, when they got up, I was like, he's had a perfusion rate over 97% all night. He went between 97 and 100. It took 3 days for his oxygenation rate to go above the 80s. And I knew, first of all, I knew the minute I laid my hands on him that this child was going to be fine. I also knew when the neonatologist said, we've got to put him on phenobarbital, he's having major seizures, that wasn't going to happen. And I specifically remember one conversation I had with her, and she was gentle and kind. I mean, they were so helpful and so nice. And like I said, I'm so grateful that they kept him alive long enough for his body to do the healing. But when she said, we've got to get him on this, he had a serious seizure at 2 o'clock. I was like, he didn't have a seizure at 2 o'clock. I had my hands on him at 2 o'clock. She said, well, the EEG shows that he had a seizure. So I looked at her. We're thinking neuroplasticity, in my mind. Mm-hmm. I looked at her, I said, okay, I understand that. I said, what's the possibility that what you're interpreting on the EEG as abnormal, because it's different than what you would typically want to see, I said, what's the possibility that that's his innate intelligence sparking new pathways, developing new neurological connections to repair the damage that occurred during the birth process? And I'm telling you, it was such a beautiful moment, because she looked at me, she was like, I never thought about it that way. I said, well, that's how I look at the body, because I believe that he's got an innate intelligence that is actually going to heal his body as long as we keep him free of interference. She went, well, I guess you just do what you do. And she literally turned around and walked off. And when they had him off of all life support, except a feeding tube by day 6, because they took the respirator out at day 4, but they continued to give him oxygen, because if they took the oxygen off, he wasn't saturating well. But by the end of day 6, he was breathing on his own. He hadn't developed the suckling reflex strong enough yet, so he couldn't feed from my daughter's breast. But they were feeding him my daughter's milk through the gastric tube, through the nasal tube. And I'll tell you, they continued to observe him. They kept him another week. The child is a normal, fully functioning 3-week-old baby today.
Wow.
Okay. Now, I still get the wow. You said wow, and my entire body just shivered. And I'll tell you that it was like I'd been called to be a chiropractor and practiced my entire life to take care of that child during those 4 days. Because it was on the fourth day when he started showing huge improvement that I said to my daughter, I said, do you realize I still have the same clothes I had on when I flew here from Atlanta? And she started to laugh and she was like, I didn't notice. I said, I haven't had a shower. I haven't even brushed my teeth in 4 days. And you know what? I never noticed. I was so in that zone that Jim Parker taught me, being presently time conscious and having faith, constant belief in the product, service, and idea of chiropractic, that time stopped. And when Joe Dispenza talks about neuroplasticity, he talks about, how the brain starts to change physiologically and then morphologically, and how when you're connected that way, chiropractors connected innate with another human being, he says time literally stops. He says you go from being someone to no one to just everyone. You're just connected. And that's the experience I had. And so from that moment on, I became that much more on fire. I was on fire. I mean, anybody that knows me will tell you I've been on fire for chiropractic my entire life. But I am more on fire now to help more chiropractors get their stories out and tell the story, because Huntley was one of 16 children in that NICU. He's the only one who was under chiropractic care. He's the only one who left that high-level NICU by day 6. There are babies that were there that had been there for weeks. The one across from 8 weeks. One mother told my daughter, I think she'd been there like 11 or 12 weeks. But Huntley was out of the high-level NICU in 6 days. He was out of the hospital in 14 days. Thank you, God. They did an awesome job with him, and they allowed me to do what I do. Now, what if we could get that message to more neonatologists? What if we could get more chiropractors? What if we could get a chiropractor in every NICU in the world?
Absolutely.
How would that change the process for these children? And so I've become more animated about it, which is why The Art of Being Healthy, I initially looked at it as, a series of 2 or 3 books, and now I'm looking at it as a series of at least another 10, because I'd love to get at least 1,000 great stories published, 100 per book. Oh, that is very weird. I apologize. I didn't realize I had my phone off, but it was ringing through my computer.
Oh, okay.
I apologize for that noise. So to get 1,000 chiropractors to get their stories out so that we can really get that storytelling. But this time around, Dr. Dan Sullivan, who's a friend and really into the science of chiropractic, is actually going to attach 2 or 3 scientific references to each story. And so we're going to step it up because, real life accounts of children and mothers healing with chiropractic, you read them, you will tear up, I guarantee you, because I read many and I read them all, obviously, 5 times, and I cried almost every single time. And most of the times it was like, so grateful that child got well, and so sad that some parents never know that this is available for their children. And so now we're going to take it up a step, and instead of being anecdotal stories, we're going to say, okay, here's the anecdotal story, here's a scientific attachment to why that person got well with chiropractic. So that's what I'm passionate about. I mean, other than everything I do at Life University, which is a beautiful place to work, and with a great leader, Dr. Guy Riekman, and an exceptional executive team with Dr. Cynthia Boyd and Dr. Rob Scott, who's our provost, Dr. Mark Schneiders. I mean, all sorts of just awesome people who are so dedicated to the chiropractic profession. So we have a good time every single day, even though we work our tails off, but we're hopeful that the process that we embark on and that we teach and share and bring to the world is going to have an impact on humanity. Because at the end of the day, that's why I wake up every day. What can I do today to impact someone? And then by impacting that one, what can I do today that in time will impact humanity? And we can just walk out the back door, because it's not about any one individual. The reality is that not one individual in our profession can do this, but collectively we can do something phenomenal. And for the audience listening to this podcast, if you listen to it, if it's published quickly, there's a movie that I saw last week called Remember the Goal. And I'd encourage you to go see the movie. Apparently it's only going to appear in movie theaters. It's not going to go to DVD, etc. But Remember the Goal. And just look it up online today. And I'll tell you, it's about a cross-country team. But it caused me to focus on when we remember the goal of why we wake up in the morning. When you remember the goal of why you step through the front door or the back door of your chiropractic office in the morning or in the afternoon, when you remember the goal is to help people thrive, to help people discover and experience full vitality, and you always remember that goal, you do whatever it takes to get there. It's about the people.
Well, what a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing such a personal story of chiropractic. And chiropractors, don't forget about the power that we have to affect lives positively. If you ever feel yourself down about your business or your profession, it is these kinds of stories that make a difference in real people's lives every day. That is what makes the profession so great. I want to shift now to the final thoughts. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, and that's where we find ourselves now. So, besides the wonderful books you are writing, and I'm definitely going to be linking in the show notes to those for people who are interested, what's a favorite book you recommend that our listeners check out?
Well, they're called a series of books called the Green Books. Oh my gosh, what a concept, right? The Green Books. And it just floors me when I talk to chiropractors and I say, so when's the last time you read a Green Book? And they go, oh, I don't think I've ever read one. Or I ask the question, you've probably heard that there are 33 chiropractic principles. And they say, yeah, I've heard about it. Have you ever read them? No. That drives me crazy. And so I've got a series of Green Books. I've got the entire series of Green Books, actually. My favorite still is The Bigness of the Fellow Within. And though, yesterday I went to Dr. Longyear. It was called The Science of Chiropractic. And what I do and what I've been doing for decades now is I literally just pick a Green Book in the morning and I just open it wherever. I will be honest, I have never read any of the Green Books from cover to cover. I've never read from page 1 in, let's say, the science, to page 400 plus. I've never done it. But I've read thousands and thousands of Green Book pages because I just pick the book, I open it. Now, it's not to tell you that I haven't read some chapters of books. So, for example, in the science book, I remember reading, the entirety of the Normal Complete Cycle, for example. There are pieces that I've read chapters in its entirety, but on a day-to-day basis, that's what I do. In the morning, I do my soul preparation, and then I tap into a Green Book. And I don't read for a long time. I typically read 5, 10 minutes maybe. I'll read 1, 2, 5 pages. But it sets me up for success. It set me up for success in my practice. For probably the first, most of my 25 years in practice, I would read the Parker Principles. There was 13 of them. Simple things. Just feed your mind with who you want to be and what you want to accomplish based on your why. I have a very simple why. It's been the same thing for 3 decades at least. And it's my purpose statement, my personal purpose statement, which reads this way. I pledge my life to my greatest expression of love and service for the benefit of humanity. That's my purpose statement. That's why I get up in the morning. That's my why. And then on that foundation, I have, when I was in practice, I had the practicing chiropractor pillar. And now I have a chiropractic administrative pillar, if you like. I have a speaker pillar. I have a husband pillar. I have a father pillar. I have a grandfather pillar. But I build from that foundational premise. And when you have a strong why, everything evolves from there. But you've got to create a ritual or a series of rituals that allow you to stay connected to your why. Because you know what? You're going to trip up sometimes. There's going to be mountains to go over. There's going to be huge boulders right in the middle of your pathway. And if you're not willing to go around and do whatever it takes to get there, then you're going to fall. First you falter, then you fall. Let me tell you something. It's much more difficult to get up from a serious fall than it is to stay committed and to walk around the boulder or to climb over the boulder, even in 105-degree weather, to climb over that darn hill instead of just stopping and allowing yourself to fall. I believe that if our colleagues develop rituals that cause them to stay focused on their why with a really strong how, and they built a team of people around them, they were with mentors or with coaches or whatever, created groups, or they joined Life Vision and came and hung out with us 3 times a year at Life University or in the Atlanta region, or they decided to come to Life Vision Canada that we're going to host at the end of March in 2017. If we create groups that way, and there's many groups, right? So there's groups at Life, there's other groups. There are other groups that I highly respect. You know, Dr. Claudia Anrig and her pediatric group. You know, Dr. David Jackson, his EPIC group. You know, Brad Glowacki's communication process. Troy Dukowitz. I mean, we have so many awesome people in our profession, but be part of something would be my final suggestion, and create the rituals that will allow you to experience life fully. Because if you are living a vital life, you become a living example of what's possible. If you're not living a vital life, you will not have the impact that you otherwise could have. But if you are mentally, spiritually, physically living a life filled with vitality, people want what you have, and you will have an impact. It will be huge, a huge positive impact on people's lives and on the health of entire communities. That's how it starts.
Dr. LaMarche, I want to thank you so much for spending some of your very valuable time with us here today. What is the best way for people to contact you and find out more about you, the books you've written, and where you can be seen and heard in upcoming talks?
So my email address at Life University is my first name, period, my last name. So Gilles, period, Lamarche, LAMARCHE @life.edu. Or you could obviously message me on Facebook. I have Gilles Lamarche DC, and I also have Dr. Gilles Lamarche. Unfortunately, my DC can't take any new friends. I've been at 5,000 for years already. But I pride myself on responding to communication. If I'm anywhere near a computer, I respond to communication within 24 hours, at least Monday to Friday. But I do travel. So like next week, I fly to London and I speak at the CI Congress. Invited by Doctors Joe and Steve Davidson. Now, I'm literally flying to London on Tuesday night, coming back on Friday morning. And then the following week, invited by Dr. Auto Tovar to go to Chiro missions in the Dominican Republic. So I'll be speaking there, but also, you know, volunteering with another great group of people. And, in October, we have Life Vision here in Atlanta, lifevisionseminar.com. In November, I know I'm speaking for Dr. Dan Pompa. I'm also speaking at the Chiropractic Awareness Council. They've changed their name now. The name escapes me, but in Toronto. So yeah, I mean, we're getting out and about, and I accept invitations because I'm just so passionate about being a chiropractor and wanting more people, more chiropractors to understand the true exceptional gift and value that each and every one of you has in your hands. And when you connect those hands with your head and your heart, that's what people call miracles. I just call them the reality of what chiropractic offers when you connect man the physical to man the spiritual. So when you're connected to an individual innate to innate and you deliver a chiropractic adjustment, it doesn't matter what technique you're using. When you deliver the appropriate chiropractic adjustment at the appropriate time, that person begins to change instantaneously. There is a change in the barrage of information going to the brain, and therefore a change in how the brain is communicating to the body. You can go back to the simplicity of the safety pin, the afferent, the efferent. If there's a break in the afferent, there's a break in the efferent. And whenever there's a break in either or, you've got an issue, and you are not living a vital life. I want all of our colleagues to live a vital life so they can then transmit that message to everyone they encounter.
Well, Dr. LaMarche, I want to thank you so much for everything you have done for the chiropractic profession over your career and for sharing your passion about chiropractic with us here today.
It has been an honor and a pleasure. Always love being with chiropractors, whether it's face-to-face, online, on a phone, on a plane, wherever. I love chiropractic and I love chiropractors, so always happy to serve. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thanks for listening to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast at www.chirobusinessmojo.com.